Hey Ty, you want to see my knob?
Uh, Aidan, this is audio podcast.
It's right. It's right here.
Oh,
Can you? Oh,
oh.
right, audio. Can you describe it for our listeners?
Well, it's certainly a girthy knob. I'm not sure I've seen a knob quite so flat and yet wide. You've got FunFactor, two old gamers reviewing old video game magazine reviews. I'm Ty Shelter, he's Aidan Moher, and we're two professional writers who grew up loving the video games and video game magazines in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. Every episode, we take a critical look back on the games media that, for better and for worse, inspired us to do what we do. First, go to funfactorpod.com. Follow the show on your podcatcher of choice. Leave us a rating or a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your media. We'll read the best, kindest, funniest, and most insightful ones on the air in our letters section. Please consider becoming a member of FunFactor Ultra, our premium tiers that unlock ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and the members-only channels of our Discord. Just go to funfactorpod.com and I promise you can't miss it. And hey, if you are watching this live on stream, you are already a member of FunFactor Ultra, already enjoying the benefits that come with that membership. And we're hoping some of you guys who asked questions today in our special episode will be able to hear your questions live, joining in the audience. We appreciate you all so much. Help us spread the word. Get our video in more eyeballs, our audio in more ear holes. Shout us out on Blue Sky at funfactorpod.com and everywhere else at FunFactorPod. Aidan, way back before Web 2.0, and Web 1.0 was just learning to crawl. I guess B crawled. Magazines had letters sections. They were a way for especially passionate readers to give praise for the content they loved, gripe about content they hated, pine for content they wanted, and maybe, just maybe, get the thrill of seeing their own words and their own name in print. Geeky publications like comic books and fanzines often had a robust letters section, and game mags were no different. You've said you sent in some letters back in the day, right?
No, I have not. Being in Canada, I guess I technically could have, but I think in a lot of ways those magazines felt out of reach for me because most of the letters, I would have said before we started the show that most of the letters were from American readers, but I do see more Canadian ones than I expected. And so I was pretty passive with reading magazines. I got more into that sort of two-way style of communication when we got into the web era, however.
Of course. And that two-way communication, as we have talked about before, letters sections often inspired a sort of like primordial parasociality. Game players in particular encouraged this. If we go back to June 1995, we can see ground zero for a particular brand of nonsense that set the tone for the letters section for literal years. We could, and maybe someday should, do a whole episode about this. But for now, Aidan, would you like to be Habeeb the torturer? Or would you like to handle managing editor Bill Donahue's response?
Oh my gosh, I will take Habeeb the torturer. Sounds
okay,
good.
Great.
That was my nickname in high school.
Yeah.
Hello, I am Habeeb the torturer, and I have a little story to tell you. It all started one day. Sorry. It all started one day when I bought Doom. The game seemed fun at first, but after a while it got boring. This boredom drove me a little bit insane. I found myself trying to find more rewarding ways of killing zombies in Doom. Here's how I'd do it. First, I'd shoot them about 100 times. Then I'd chop off their heads and do my ancient Habeeb dance. That's not all. I have a little game I play with zombies' decapitated heads. First, I hang the heads from my ceiling. Then I pull out a baseball bat and take a few swings at them. The first head to hit the ground wins. Now the trouble comes into my story. One, I have not read this ahead of time. Where did you find this, Ty? Now the trouble comes into my story.
Scroll down in the doc. This is literally a printed letter. There's a big red skull. It says "Save the Last Dance."
I feel like Bill Donahue wrote this himself. One day while I was playing my little game, my mom walked in and threatened to take away my Doom because she somehow noticed the heads hanging from my ceiling. So naturally, I had to kill her. So I did. Then I played my game with her head too. Then my dad walks in and sends over some guys in white, and they lock me up in this big white padded room with nothing in it but my computer and a baseball bat. I'm still in here, and I have no zombie heads from Doom to play my little game with because they took it away. So could you guys send me Doom so that I can carry on with my harmless little game? Habeeb the Torturer, Littleton, Colorado. I know who actually wrote this. It was Jack Thompson and Joe Lieberman.
Yeah. So yeah, I actually found a thread talking about like, hey, was this real? Was this a plant? Did Bill Donahue write this himself? And who knows? I couldn't, I had a couple people go, we should talk to somebody, and maybe if I did a little digging, we could get somebody to admit it. Either way, but I'll handle Bill's response here. Again, managing editor, which for those of you in journalism, this is like the person who like signs the checks. This is like, they're a senior management role. Bill, aka Mugu the Mangler. Finally, one of my kind, Habeeb, my brother, my hourly prayers to Gazuga go out to you in your honor of pain and imprisonment. In your hour of pain and imprisonment. I will dance the eldritch Mugu dance on the highest minaret every full moon until the heathen sees the error of his ways and releases all of our brethren from the asylums. Soon will come the cleansing, and when the sky turns hellfire red, Gazuga will return. Until that moment, dance and dream of the many heads that shall hang from our shrines, and how the crack of the skull bats shall echo across all the realms of the 13 dimensions. Yeah. So again, this set the tone for the letters section. Plenty of readers wanted to play along. Mentions of Habeeb, Gazuga, the cleansing, the happening, etc. flooded the game players letters section, along with this conspiratorial, fantastic, wildly overzealous writing. And everybody would be making up their own proper nouns, their own weirdo things, and the writers would all play along. It's much like the sort of play along yes-anding present that was already in like Usenet and BBSs, and we would very soon see in web forums and message boards, and now we have all over Reddit and social media. It is in that spirit that I offer one of my 2 published letters to game players. I genuinely could not find the other one. I also genuinely did not want to share this because I am genuinely embarrassed by it. But as a journalist and a chronicler of history, I offer this literally true story that I sent in to game players and embellished the hell out of as best I could. Again, at the tender age of 14 years old when I wrote this. It was published in the May 1996 issue. Here's Carrie Hoskins, who was the actor who did the mocap for Sonya from Mortal Kombat. Yes. Sonya Blade. And little context here. This was this really happened. Again, I was watching just regular local news, and she came on and did a sit down Q&A. There was like a Mortal Kombat live tour where they actually got many of the actual actors, and they just did some sort of live show of the kind that was, Sesame Street live, Ninja Turtles live, Mickey Mouse live. You would have, and they would go in civic centers and basketball arenas around the country, right? Well, they got actual Sonya Blade for this. So this is the thing. Again, 14 years old. I ask everyone for grace. I was out on a dangerous recon mission, searching for info on the top secret Chinchilla Drive peripheral for Virtual Boy, when I intercepted an encrypted transmission from the reclusive, icy Black Hand of Death cult. It was a live interview with Uber Babe herself, Carrie Hoskins. The drool slowly gathered in pools under my chin as she answered softball questions lobbed by Liz Talbot, a local news anchor believed to be a conspirator in the now infamous Noodle incident. That's 2 Calvin and Hobbes references so far, if you're paying attention at home. Outfitted in full Sonia regalia, the pulchritudinous Mrs. Yes, she's married, Hoskins revealed. 1, she's never been in a fight. 2, she was once stalked by a guy in Minnesota. 3, she thinks Mortal Kombat is about self-discipline, not splattering internal organs on the sidewalk. 4, she sucks at Mortal Kombat. I hold this information up to you, mighty evil masters of polygons. I hope it appeases your ever-growing hunger for gaming news. And I signed off as the Marlin because I was very into Marlins. Like the fish, literally. And also, therefore, the baseball team, because they had just started playing at this point. So the response from Mike Salmon, and again, Mike Salmon would go on to be VP of Biz Dev at 2K Games for several years, and since 2017, he's been a very highly paid consultant. He's the senior vice president of games for McGid, some kind of mega media and entertainment research-based business strategy company. So just keep that in mind. She's married. Damn. And she can't prove I was even in Minnesota at the time. Notably, Mike did go to the University of Minnesota. Besides that, I wasn't stalking, I was sauntering. Get me your husband's name and I shall make everything okay. If you can't get enough at Carrie, you should check out War Gods. It took a small army of very happy men to squeeze her voluptuous body into her tight and revealing new outfit. And I believe that is the picture we see here. So again, this is, all throughout the magazine, throughout years, you'd see this sort of, people trying to play along, people trying to yes and, people trying to impress the writers of the magazine, people trying to, be little tiny writers of the magazine themselves. And, I think the impulse is, hold on. Sorry, I'm trying to get the layout back to where it's just the two of us. That's close. That's in the ballpark. But yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. Like, I'm impressed by the density of information and language.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know pulchritudinous. I don't even know that word. And I'm like the person in everybody I know in real life. I'm the guy who knows all the weird words, right?
Right.
And I've never heard of that word. And you were using it at 14. Pretty impressive. Also impressed that you stuck in a Virtual Boy reference in there.
Yeah, that's right. I've always been me.
As we all hop on the Virtual Boy bandwagon with the Nintendo Switch Online release, you were there at the beginning. You were standing that Virtual Boy like nobody else. Amazing stuff.
Yeah. So again, it's I'm trying to impress these guys. I've got my joke density, and because it's letters, I had hours to workshop this and put as many little references as I could, many jokes I could, and that's better than, and I don't know how many letters they got per month, right? I don't know how many they were editing through. It was probably hundreds. But then again, you could post something today on Twitter, and if you're a big account, get dozens of replies, many of whom are doing the same joke in your mentions over and over, right? Yeah. And so just that kind of delayed thing, it made it a little less toxic and a little more creative and fun for everyone involved, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that always stood out to me about letter sections is, I don't know how much editorial, copy editing went into these, but they're always clean. They're always the language is always readable, and you get in comment sections now on the internet or any time over the past 20 years, and it was everybody knows not to read the comment section. You get just the most brainless stuff, but this just the filter of only the best stuff rising to the top, and then probably some light editorial for readability happening probably helped. But like you said too, you grew up to be a writer, It was there at 14. And so like just that time, just like not being able to like post stuff and make it public immediately. But essentially like going through an editor for all of this stuff makes a big difference in terms of like curating a lot of it.
All right. Well, folks, our favorite letters are yours, the ones you send us. And of course, our audience is extremely well versed in writing, editing, producing, streaming, socialing, etc. And it is a pleasure and honor to receive all of your excellent, excellent questions. And in the spirit of slightly delayed parasociality, we are doing a slow motion AMA about our first season, The Generation Gap, that just came to a close. We asked you folks on Discord, Blue Sky, etc. Hit us up with your burning questions. And now we have burning answers for you. If you are not already a member of FunFactor Ultra, not watching us broadcast this live, not getting ad-free episodes, don't worry. Just hang tight through the break. When we come back, we will flip through... Oh, no. We will not flip through anything. We will flip through your questions and your emails and answer them. We've got mail, but this week, the letters are the show. For this special mailbag episode of FunFactor, we reached out to you. We received a ton of great reader questions, so let's get right to them.
So our first question today comes from Chris Chapman on Blue Sky, and Chris asks, how would you design the ideal games magazine using elements of other magazines, like some Mad Magazine scientist? For example, the reviews of magazine Y with the editorial coverage of magazine Z and the cover design of magazine X, and so on. What would be your ultimate chimera of a games magazine, Ty?
Man, I love this question. Definitely the like paper stock of early Next Generation, super fancy laminated everything. Probably previews and screenshots from GameFan. But then like editorial copy of Next Generation, you know, feature articles and previews and stuff. Not their reviews. Game players, this is tough because we've been talking about this a little bit on the show and on social media, where when I was a kid, I loved game players increasingly through the years. Wonky, meticulous, break it down into 82 subcategories and pile it back up through weighted averages to try and come to like the ultimate like objective final score. And you know, as an adult, I could see how much baloney it all is. You know, how often the final score seems to be the thing they started with and then worked back to, you know, or how much subcategories seem to have been manipulated to make the score come out the way they want it. So I think I'll still go with reviews for game players, because I got to get some game players love in there. And the copy genuinely was, they usually put, you know, good space into the review copy, and, you know, whatever. All the extra little score bits were at least interesting to note.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would go with game players reviews as well, for basically all the reasons that you mentioned. But I also liked that they were very like you talk about trying to like get the objective score or whatever, like, but they were also very like personality driven, and like who was reviewing it mattered a lot. But I also liked for the major reviews that they got second opinions. And, you know, when I think back about the reviews that stick in my mind, they're all game players reviews. So I got to go with game players, even though like, you know, I doubt that if we averaged out our scores over the run of the show, that game players, you know, like would get the highest average score of like, you know, what we're rating it. They are my favorite. I love game fans' enthusiasm and just like just their fanzine nature. I like that. Outside of reviews, like we have read some reviews in GameFan that didn't really necessarily like meet my standard for like good criticism, but the fact that they had the capsule reviews and the long reviews and just like the crazy layouts, and it's just so dense with just, there's like every millimeter on every page is filled with something I want to look at, and that all comes from that enthusiasm. So like game players reviews, game fans enthusiasm, and then like I felt like EGM was the one that kind of like, EGM was my bread and butter. As I look over at my like library of old gaming mags, it's EGM like outnumbers everything else combined. And I think just that whole package, but it also just the way that they felt like they had a grasp on the entire games industry, like a broad depth of like coverage for like everything from sports games to RPGs to like just everything in between. And so like that sort of like broad range of EGM would probably be the third thing I want to see in like a perfect magazine.
Cool. And I should have asked for pronunciation on this. Nick, I'm gonna go with Getty, Goede, on Discord. Was there a game in your childhood that made you say something like, "Wow, games can do this"? And if so, what was it?
Yes. I mean, I wouldn't be where
non-Chrono Trigger division, preferably.
No, and like, you know, everybody knows I love Chrono Trigger, and it does some amazing things, you know, but my like moments like that had happened way before like Chrono Trigger for me. Like Final Fantasy VI was a big one for me. That's when I kind of discovered RPGs, and I've told this story before, but I had a cool babysitter and we would always play Doom together. But one time he came over with a cartridge for Final Fantasy III, as it was known at the time, popped it in, and I was just rocked. I was like, how is this a thing? It's like a book I can play. And that was a big eye-opening moment for me. But also just like, I mean, playing Doom back in the day, and like having played Wolfenstein, but particularly playing Doom, and it was like, how has this game just transported me to this other world? Like, how does Doom turn this tiny little like 12-inch computer monitor into Mars, or like one of Mars's moons, and with, you know, covered in demons and stuff? Like, how does it have this transportative quality? And then like another example for me was Link's Awakening on the Game Boy. And so, you know, I had played lots of Link to the Past, but having like a whole Zelda experience on Game Boy, and this whole little like world that felt like it belonged just to me as I stared at that little tiny screen was like magical. And so that idea of like portable gaming, and the same with like Super Mario Land 2, like 6 golden coins, just the idea that you could have these personal little worlds that you fall into, and like, because there's so much agency in video games, like every experience I had in that was unique to me, and everybody else playing that had their own unique experiences. So that transportative quality of games.
Yeah, let's go.
I think
transportative, I guess. I don't know. Transportation.
Ultimately, that's like what really, like, as a kid, blew me away, was the way that games could transport me somewhere else.
Cool. Yeah, like a bunch of just wild memories are popping into my head. Probably when I was like 4.5 at a babysitter's house, and they put in Double Dribble for the NES, and the guy goes, "Double Dribble, Double Dribble," and like the most horrible digitized voice sample. I'm like, yo, the video game just said "Double Dribble" out loud in English. Incredible. And then do, the, you know, terrible national anthem, you know, horrible digitized sound of the ball hitting the hardwood. Just really like, wow, okay, dang. Like, Super Nintendo, like 16 things are going in my head right now.
Yeah.
My rich friend who had everything had the TurboGrafx and the Turbo Express.
Oh.
And also, which, first of all, just a portable system that could literally play the exact same games, right? Yeah. Take the little smart card out of the TurboGrafx.
Yeah.
Put it in the Turbo
Sega
Express.
Nomad
keep playing it. Like, that's wild. And then he also had the TV tuner.
I wanted a TV tuner for my Game Gear so bad.
Dude, yeah. And so we're like waiting for the bus in like 5th grade. And he's got like Ninja Turtles like over the air on his little TurboGrafx, you know, Turbo Express. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
Oh my
Mind
God,
blowing.
dude, the future is here. It's the future already. Oh my God. Wipeout was something that, like, it was the game that I was playing in my head when I was playing F-Zero. Right? Like, the idea of maglev racing cars is something that, like, had been in science fiction. I'd read, like, science fiction books or short stories or whatever with that concept. And, like, in my head, I was, oh, man, like, I would make a game that would have this. It would look like this, right? And, I'd been thinking about it since I was a kid. I read, something about, like F1 cars. At the time this was true, they found out this was a bad idea eventually, but Formula 1 cars created so much downforce that at speed, the track could go upside down because they were generating more downforce than the car actually weighed.
Sure.
So if it was already at speed, it could technically be going upside down, and the aerodynamically it would stick to the
Sonic
seat.
the Hedgehog.
And so
it would work.
Yeah. No problems here.
Just don't break.
Rip to Ayrton Senna, one of the greats. But anyway, so basically, maybe the best driver of all time had a crash where he bottomed out and lost downforce in the middle of a corner, and the car physically couldn't turn fast enough anymore because he wasn't sticking to the ground. Anyway, so F-Zero, like F-Zero was like, oh man, this is like so close to the game that's in my mind. And then like Wipeout like was the game that was in my mind, and playing Wipeout just being like, dude, this is so incredible. And it was also so cool. The soundtrack was amazing. The visual design and language was amazing. It was like, wow, this is like really, really actually cool, grown up cool. Yeah. Not like I'm 14 and I think this is cool. This is like 22-year-olds are like, damn, that's cool. And that it was a great game. And so that was definitely a like huge generational jump. And like you said, some of the RPG stuff, Chrono Trigger we've talked about before. Final Fantasy VII, we just spent a whole episode talking about.
That's another one that could, we've done 2 episodes about how it was doing so many things that just blew my mind. But
yeah, absolutely.
Before we move on to the next question, just shout out to the rain in the opening sequence of Link to the Past when you leave Link's house.
Oh yeah.
Like that was like still one of the moments in gaming. My other answers were sort of like emotional focus, but that one was just like, holy crap, like how it looks like it's raining in real life. Like what is going on
and
here?
Sounds like it. Like
this is like, and it sounds like it. So like what in terms of like tech and art, like that was one of those moments where I was like, oh, this is for real. Like this is real life. Let's go. So our next question comes from Clea de Sandre's Alt on Blue Sky, who wants to know who our favorite gaming villains are.
Sigma from Mega Man X pops to mind.
Yeah.
I love I understand his motivations. Right. I understand where he's coming from. Even as you're attacking him, he's hitting you with the philosophy of like, no, like join with us. We need to get rid of the stupid humans. Like they subjugate us. But we're the superior beings. Like, oh, okay, all right. Like this is, and it's good. It's both cathartic to beat him, but also you're sitting there going, he's got some good points. He's not just a villain for villain's sake, especially in a Mega Man game where it was like, I'm Dr. Wily. I'm Wily because it's my name. Like, okay, all right, whatever.
Yeah. I think like that's at the core of all the great villains, right? Is somebody who you're like, you do empathize with. And so for me, I think of Ygraph in Final Fantasy Tactics for many of the same reasons. Like Ygraph was basically like a social anarchist who like everything he said, I was like, yeah, man, that's like sick. You're right. Like we should do that. We should tear down, the
also we get some really
we
good
should distribute wealth among the population. Like, yes, 100%. But he kind of like pursues his goals too far and then turns into sort of the villain he always railed against by the end. And so like Ygraph has always been a favorite of mine. And
can we give an honorable mention to all the church officials in
Well,
in that game as well.
Yeah, well, yes, the church in every RPG in the PlayStation era, for sure, for its role in radicalizing me against that. But my all-time favorite villain is Galleon from Lunar Silver Star Story Complete.
Not Galleon, dear
Aidan.
Magic Emperor Galleon.
And again, sort of a fallen hero with like a noble goal of trying to lift up like an oppressed group of people, but doing it in all the wrong ways. And I think that he's just fabulous. John Truitt's voice acting in the PlayStation remaster of the game is just so good. It's iconic. And Galleon was one of the first villains that I really looked at as somebody that I was like, oh, I mean, exactly what we're talking about. Oh, like I understand his motivations. You know, I understand why he's doing the things that he did. You know, I was coming off games like Final Fantasy VI where it's like, oh, Kefka's just like his brain got broken by the Magitech experiments. You know, that's like his motivations. He's just like, you know, his psyche is broken. You know, even Sephiroth never really hit for me. Like, he wanted to destroy the planet. Like, now I look back and see sort of like some of the anti-capitalist, imperialist undertones of Sephiroth. But I think those are stronger in the remake trilogy than they are in
the personal, you know, his drive for just personal vendetta as well.
Yeah,
just
like kind of muddies that up. Like, I don't think his goals were necessarily as noble as he wanted to make them seem.
He was super cool. Was the thing.
He was cool. Absolutely. Yeah.
Huge badass.
Yeah.
Oh, like
100%.
You know. Yeah. But Kefka was one of the first that I really like. You know, he's so cartoonishly evil, right?
Yes.
But like, you just hate him.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, good villain, but not with the level of depth that you started to get in that PlayStation era. I mean, Lunar was a Sega CD game, so it was around, but I didn't play it till PlayStation. But yeah, any of those enemies, those villains that are like have some sort of ethical core, even if their actions or their, you know, approach to changing the world and making it better for people, you know, their actions aren't necessarily the right way to go about it.
Cool. Rock Dan on Blue Sky goes, besides the reviews, what is your favorite section / feature to read when you look through old magazines? I'm remembering our guest spot on Retrograde Amnesia when Chris was like, I went right to the codes every month. And oh, okay, all right, cool.
Not the codes or the strategy stuff. Like, I didn't really care much about that stuff at all. There were a few strategy guides. Like, there's this issue of Megafan I have. It has like Tekken on the cover, Tekken 2, I can't remember which one. Tekken 3? No. But in any case, it has like a 108 stars guide for Suikoden. And so that was what I used whenever I would replay Suikoden, right? To get all 108 stars. And like, I found it when I was archiving and processing all my magazines. I was like, oh, hey, like, it's too bad I just beat this Suikoden remaster, because I would totally just use this guide to get everybody again. But for me, like, reviews were always, of course, like a big one. It's hard not to say previews, like getting a new screenshot, even if it was like one little grainy like photo of a CRT, was just so intoxicating. You know, like, it was just so like, it just felt like you were in on something in the best way. And then, like, as the games media kind of matured, we then started getting like deeper like analysis or context or developer interviews, like all that good stuff. Whereas, like, you know, in the early 90s, it was like previews were like, hey, went to TGS or whatever was around at that time and took some photos and talked to some guys at a booth. And here's what we learned. Whereas, like, you know, as previews got more, you know, serious or they're just more robust, they became even more like just such a great source of information. And so like as we go back and look at some of these interviews, I'm realizing how much amazing access we had to the games media, or the games industry as members of the media back then.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I read it front to back every month, pretty much. You know, like I'm just like that way as a reader.
I actually read it back to front. I would read magazines back to front for some reason.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Weird.
That's allowed.
I know.
You can do that.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know why. I think his reviews were at the back of EGMs for a while or whatever. But in any case,
typically reviews are at the back. But I liked the letter to the editor and stuff. Previews were definitely big because again, at this time, the generation gap, especially 95 through 97, it was like what games are capable of doing is just exploding, right? And so you just see one screenshot and go like, this could be like what I've never seen anything like that before. Yeah. Oh my gosh, like the potential. And they started talking about tech specs and stuff in ways that like that was really interesting to me. I did subscribe to game magazines in the 8-bit days.
Yeah.
I started my Game Player subscription, and I think it was 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Right. And like they were not talking about megahertz and like they were not talking about this stuff. I was just on the Still Loading podcast and doing about Mario 3, right? And a huge part of what made Mario 3 the game it was onboard chips. What we call the FX chip in the Super NES days. Okay, cool. There's MMC, multimedia controller, something like that.
Yeah.
Multi-memory controller, and so a bunch of capabilities of the system were being put on the game cartridges. Yeah. And I had no awareness of that. I was reading game magazines every month. No clue, right? So there are all sorts of technical problems and solutions and new technologies and developments happening all the time in the games console world that we just weren't hearing about until this era when we were like, oh, now we're starting to get this news out of Japan. Now these technical details are starting to leak, so that was really fascinating. But again, it was reviews I was fascinated by. In most magazines, I was fascinated by the reviews. I've always been interested in critique. I've always been interested in evaluating and examining, why do I like the things I like?
Yeah.
What do I like about the things I like? What's cool? I get into something and immediately I'm like, what's cool? What about this is cool? If I get into this, how would I do it? Right? Like, what cool thing would I buy? What would my cool thing be?
Yep.
That's, to me, reviews are part of that. But like Next Generation had a lot more, as we've talked about and looked at, like what's the future of gaming, right? What's the future of, hey, like here's a big feature on indie games, right? Like this is the indie scene. Here's a big feature with whatever, they serialize the columns of Chris Crawford, who I've wanted to do a bonus episode on Chris Crawford since before we started this podcast. And every time I dig into it, I'm like, there's too much history and too much I want to say. And I know the Game Study Buddies podcast just read one of his books and talked about it, and I suspect they're also pursuing a pretty rigorous deep dive into Chris Crawford as well. But serializing basically a book length or incredibly long essay into as serialized essays across the first it was like from like issue 10 to like 22 or something, the way games ought to be. And they're fascinating documents. Everything Chris Crawford has written is fascinating because it's like alternating sentences will be like brilliant insight, unbelievably spot on prediction of where games are going, absolute idiocy, sexist, totally wrong, absolutely brilliant. You're just sitting there going like, man, he called it. Oh man, he was way off. Oh yeah, he was spot on. Did he never hear of the internet? You're just sitting there, and it's fascinating, but just having somebody talk about, hey, philosophically, we're creating art, we're creating a medium here, and it's important that we as game developers, we as game consumers, we as game journalists and commentators think about what we want games to be and why we want them to be that way. And how do we want the audience to be? How big do we want the audience to be? Are games for everybody? Can they be for everybody? Should they be for everybody? What do games for everybody look like? And just thinking about that was just absolutely fascinating for me. I couldn't get enough of commentary like that. And it's it's weird that I think now we're in this era where stuff like what we're doing right now, you know, Aidan, you and me just talking about what we think about games on YouTube, on podcasts, you know, is like the dominant form of discussing games, sometimes superseding actually playing games or buying or reviewing them, right? For their own sake. Like everybody has opinions about games, whether or not they're even playing them. And so that it's just interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm preaching to the choir. I obviously have a long background as a critic, like as a book critic for a long time, and that seeking that understanding of like what makes creative works work and not work, and how they connect with people as individuals and as groups, like that, it has always been fascinating for me. And to see like this kind of rich deep dive on a monthly basis into video games and the people who make them, like, was amazing. And I feel like we're losing that big time as media contracts. Like just the openness of what you could get access to back then was wild. Like we would see, like, can you imagine, like, we go back and I look through old magazines and I see like basically Alpha Productions cuts, screenshots of like linked Ocarina of Time, right? And I look at those and that, like, you know, the magazine's showing these off and I'm like, man, that doesn't look like the final build at all. Like it doesn't look remotely like what the game ended up looking like. Can you imagine seeing like alpha footage of like the next Zelda game nowadays? Like you just don't get it. It's so polished. It's so gatekept behind sort of the mechanisms of capitalism, because it's all like, we have to make as much possible money off of this.
We have
as we can,
years
and
of
like
investment in this game, and it has to be the biggest game of all time, or we all lose our shirts and our jobs.
And so,
and
like,
maybe we all lose our shirts.
I mean,
and our
like,
jobs
it can still be the biggest game of all time, and everyone's still going to lose all their jobs, right?
Exactly.
And it's like,
exactly.
But like, so we have this like hostile environment, but we also don't get nice, good access to, you know, footage or screenshots or the development environment in the major like AAA gaming space. Of course, like we have early access. Slay the Spire 2 early access just came out, but like even early access games are still like full-fledged polished games now. Like, you know, Baldur's Gate 3 I think is one of the great examples of a game, a hugely popular influential game that came out in early access and like really grew over the course of that early access based on fan experience. And so, you know, that would be the equivalent now, but I do miss the fact that we would see, you know, stuff, screenshots or whatever, like we would get that SGI demo of Final Fantasy 6 characters on the Nintendo 64. We just, that stuff's lost. And so going back and seeing that in old magazines, that's probably my favorite thing to do now as we read through a lot of these old magazines. Our next question is from Jason WFD on Discord, who I believe is with us here on the live stream as we record this, which is awesome. His question is, what gave you the most joy during this first season and what gave you the least joy?
Oh man, this is a tough question. I mean, the least joy, our last episode where I did this big, huge, dramatic reading that I prepped for, and I'm like, I'm gonna go for broke on this. I'm gonna give this review reading like all the sauce. And then you're like, yeah, that one was the child predator that wrote that. I'm like, oh, cool, good, great, love that. I still did clip it and put it on social media because I was like, okay, like this sucks. It took the wind out of my sails, but I still think it was fun to do and kind of encapsulated the wow, look at what game magazines were and could be, and upsides and downsides all in one go.
Yeah.
Some of the most joy, I mean, actually, I think discovering some of the stuff, because it's great to look back at the stuff, you know. Aidan, like, here's the Chrono Trigger review, you know, and he puts it up on the screen and I'm like, dude, immediately I'm transported back. That's amazing. I remember every inch of that review, just like he did, right? We both read that 100 million times. We both just read it and going, oh my, someday I'm going to play this game. Imagine how great playing this game is going to be, building that into, like, that's cool. But also going and, I maybe only read like 1 or 2 issues of Game Fan my whole life coming into this, and then seeing, wow, this is different. Oh, this is interesting. Discovering the histories. I mean, some of the funnest stuff for me is actually just doing the journalism thing, just setting my journalism brain loose on the histories, going through the masthead and being like, what happened to X person? Oh, they disappeared off the internet in 2008, and who knows, right? Like, I'd have to do some real like LexisNexis. I'd have to like purchase like public records searches to actually track this person down. And then also finding like, oh yeah, Bill Donahue never stopped writing about games, and he's got like a Facebook group that publishes a like quarterly old game zine with a bunch of former game writers. Wow, cool. Okay. It's all over Dan Shu is he's just on social media. You can just tag him and he'll be like, yeah, this is what happened. And then as we discovered, maybe Kotaku will write it up in an article. Oh yeah, hey, like FunFactor published this thing, and then Shu came in and said this, and another former editor said that. Anyway, so like like going back and just finding out how many of these people who were in their mid-20s, often early 20s, went on to be executives in the gaming industry, executives in publishing, high-paid consultants, doing something else completely different entirely. It's just really fascinating to see how many of their careers developed, and that nexus in time where all of them were together making a video game magazine, and then like how all their careers went from there is just absolutely fascinating to me.
Least joy is easy for me because it's also okay. Actually, let me roll back. Let me talk about the most joy from the first season. This is going to feel a little cheesy, but it's the community of listeners and fellow games community people that we've connected with over the past year. We've got and are growing, our following on YouTube and Discord. The community on Discord's amazing, and Blue Sky, and just seeing the people resonating with the work that we're doing is so great. And connecting with, like other podcasters working in kind of retro gaming. Like we talk about the Retrograde Amnesia guys a lot, who are fabulous. Chris and Eric, you were just on Josh's Still Loading podcast, just hanging out, meeting people, connecting more deeply with people that I kind of knew a little bit before the podcast, having people reach out, via DM, be like, hey, I'd love to come on the show. And I'm like, whoa, like we're making something that resonates with people. And
Pandemonium and Greg Stewart, Stewie, and it goes. And Stewie also just like in the chat, will be like, oh, wow, I wonder what this was like. And he'd be like, well, it was like this because I was there.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
right. Yeah, sure.
Our perspective as like, oh, we read these magazines, here's what we thought. And then, having like people who are actually like straight up working at these magazines at the time or whatever, know the people were like, oh, no, this is what happened, or being able to reach out and like confirm rumors that we heard, being able to reach out like to whoever. And because we have this, this body of work, people are happy to talk to us, and that's just cool, going on the Discord every day and like just hanging out with Nick and, Tempest Strife and Jason WFD and, everybody
getting
there.
So much trouble. Like, I'm already sitting here. I'm like, okay, we got to mention Dave from Tales of the Backlog. Got to mention Matt Stormageddon and Jeff from the Fun and Games podcast. Yeah. We got to, I'm like, every time we mention one more person, I'm like, there's 6 more people we need to mention, and we're going to look like jerks.
It's just like the best. Right. And so, it's a cheesy answer, but it really is the people. And then for like least joy is also like another most joy for me, but that's just like the tech stack of running a podcast. Like I love learning about this stuff. I love going deep on getting good audio quality. I love going deep on figuring out how to run like a live production on OBS with like scene transitions and like, you know, I'm learning how to cut videos in Premiere Pro, which I have no experience doing, cutting YouTube shorts. I uploaded a YouTube short as a regular video 4 times 2 days ago and could not figure out why. And, you know, it's all so headache inducing. Like, we're recording this on in chat. Jason says he knew I was gonna say tech was the least joy, but you know, we're recording this episode in Riverside because going live on OBS with Video Ninja was given an echo, feedback echo, just for Ty. It wasn't in the recording, wasn't in my headphones, and it's like, why? And so, like, you know, the work that we do behind the scenes, there is so much that I did not anticipate. But it's also the work I love doing. And like, it's the stuff that makes me feel so satisfied at the end. So like, do I get frustrated when we're 15 minutes late to start a stream because the tech isn't working? Yeah. But like, when we figure it out and as we make like improvements every episode,
right,
I just feel really proud.
And again, our community too, you know, Lord Ruby, Andrew Blewett is, you know, he's an incredible video producer, and, you know, will come in and pop it, you know, multiple people, Quaby Lay, will come in and pop in the chat and be like, hey guys, try this. If you tried that, probably this. What resolution are you running at? You know, what bit rate, you know? And we're like, oh, okay, all right. Because we're learning this as we go. I come from a radio background, so I have some, you know, audio production knowledge, but then the video stuff is like, okay, like, I always kind of thought I could do this. I always kind of thought we could do this, but it's learning on the fly. And again, we have the grace and patience that you, the audience, have given us as we work through this on literally live on camera in real time is awesome. It's been phenomenal. Yeah,
it's been so good. And I'm just really happy with what we've produced a year in, and just thinking about like where we'll get a year from now is really exciting for me.
Yeah. All right. From Remember That Guy on Blue Sky. Is there an intrinsic importance about the physical and tactile nature of an old magazine? Are high quality scans as satisfying to you all? Do you think after sufficient time, a properly archived game website will hit the same nostalgia-wise as the paper magazines do?
This is like a really interesting question, because I think, yes, there is like importance to the physical nature of old magazines. The tactileness, I really enjoy. I think that brings a lot of joy, but I think it being a physical object that needed to be sort of like locked and printed ahead of time was really important. The fact that it's like asynchronous, so it's not trying to hit hourly deadlines. It's not trying to get news out in minutes.
Yeah.
It has weeks, is really important for the way that they covered games and the way that we talked about games. But ultimately, like, and I talked about this, I think, on the Final Fantasy VII episode, just our last episode, is I liked the way that like features were the big thing in a magazine, right? So you had a Final Fantasy VII review, and that was the big feature. But then it was a Trojan horse for getting all of that other content into your house. You know, you'd buy it for the Final Fantasy VII feature, and then you'd read a preview of whatever game, you know, that you never even knew existed. And now all of a sudden you're like, hey, this game seems really cool. I never would have found it otherwise. And so I just really I really think that aspect, the Trojan horse aspect of magazines, that you know, you don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to just like, oh, I'm just going to click on these links. I'm not going to engage with this other content at all. You can skip through past pages, but like you and I both read magazines, you know, cover to cover, but like there's a big difference between flipping past a page that still has that split second to catch your attention.
Yeah.
As opposed to like just not clicking links at all on a website. You know, will properly archived games websites still hit the same nostalgia wise as paper magazines do? Yeah. Because like there are kids who were 12 growing up with whatever, oneup.com or any of their gaming sites, but also specifically like games media and games content, like Ty was you were just saying is also YouTube videos. It's also podcasts. It's also all of those other things. And so, you know, I get nostalgic going back and watching old episodes of the One Up Show. And that was digital content online. Properly archiving games websites to like maintain that experience, I think is a challenge because like it just doesn't happen, and archiving web content's hard. So you have like the Wayback Machine or whatever, but like the interconnectedness of the web makes that's really hard. Like you click on links and then the links just don't work, or you don't have an active forum behind it. And so like, are we gonna have a podcast in 15 years where people like scroll through old like snapshots of the GIA or whatever? Like, maybe, but I think that there's also more of an in the moment aspect to the web that just makes it a little bit harder to look at things as like all encompassing, or like, you know, or like closed products that you can like look at. And yeah, I can pick up a magazine and it's that magazine, it's in front of me, it's a whole complete experience the exact way it was before. And I think that's hard to replicate with like text-based website stuff. I think that's much more relevant for like video-based webs or video game stuff, audio stuff. But yeah, I mean, the nostalgia will always be there because nostalgia is us like pining for the simpler days, right? Like as we get away from like games media even existing in the online space, people are going to be like, hey, remember when? And like go back and look at old, you know, like Kotaku stuff or whatever. And you know what? There were so many great features. There's a million features that were like too big or too long to ever fit in magazines. On the web, you know, I wrote a big 10,000 word article or feature for Kotaku about like the overlap between fantasy authors and like RPG creators. And that just like, that's never going to get old. And so like, I think in some ways, like, it's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to go look at this whole website. It's like, hey, here are these old articles that like had an impact on me. Let's look at them again. Let's bring them up. Let's think about them, see how they've kind of like aged.
Yeah. And well, first of all, I've been frantically trying to Wayback Machine Next Generation's old website because I was about to wax philosophical about, man, I would love to see this old interface again. And then I was like, I could probably do something, but then I'm going back and it's like web archiving is just really hard. You know, there's a lot of times depends on technologies that don't exist. You know, whether it's graphics assets or, you know, that the Wayback Machine doesn't capture, or it's Flash stuff that obviously doesn't work, or, you know, or wouldn't have been captured anyway. So like, there was a Next Generation for a while had this really clean layout that looked just like the magazine, right? And it had in the same fonts. It had some cool, you know, some cool, like I said, just a cool layout, just a cool UI, you know. And like, man, that nostalgia would hit for me if I could pull up that website exactly as it existed. I'll be like, damn, yo, I remember this, you know. Go see the forums, you know. There's like VBulletin 2.1 or whatever, you know, certain forum layouts that will all, you know, forum software that will always be like, yo, I spent so many hours on this forum. Like that stuff does still hit. But as Aidan said, there is something, you know, like I said, for me, like the Next Generation, the first year and a half-ish run had this thick laminated, like soft touch layered textured cover. It was really thick and it felt expensive. It felt really cool. You're like, wow, you know, this is not toys. This is not in the kids aisle. This is not something that you just give to kids thinking it's going to get thrown on the floor, on, you know, wedged under the bed, right? Like, this is a real magazine for real grown-ups and real smart people. And just by purchasing it and holding it in my little hands, I was a real big smart grown-up too. Right. So I think there was definitely an aspect to that. And just knowing you're going to go back to it over and over and it's going to be the same thing. Scans definitely hit because it's so close to, you know, you're seeing images like, I never in a million years would have remembered that. If I hadn't seen it, and now I see it and boom, comes rushing back. Right. And then there's other stuff where I'm like, I do not remember that. Like the bird poop ad. The Aidan was like, "Hey Ty, check this out," and the guy standing there like with like fake bird poop all over him, with the target still on his head, and like a shadow of a hawk above it or whatever. And like, I didn't remember that at all, but I was gobsmacked by it. And then since then, I've seen it twice more in other magazines while looking for issues to cover. So like, it definitely means something. Would it have meant more if it was in my little hands? I mean, I think we are getting dangerously close into the oldest and most boring writer debate on social media, which is, books versus e-readers. Like, is really reading? You're listening to the audiobook. If you're reading on the screen, like, don't you? And like, hey, yeah, I love to go into an old used bookstore and have that smell hit me just as much as any other writer or reader, right? That means something. But also, I just love stories, and if you put it in my brain, however you put it in my brain, cool. I do experience a bit of a difference between audiobooks and physical, reading via sight, just because how I read.
Yeah.
But like, for me, some of this gets into sort of a like quasi fetishistic, like, oh well, it's not as cool as the physical. That stuff does matter, but we've been doing this whole podcast looking at scans, being like, yo, and like everything else. So yeah, it still hits.
And like, what I think there's an interesting point there too, is that like, you talk about scans of magazines, right? And that's where the sort of the nostalgia comes from. Or I open up a real physical magazine to look at it, because as much as possible, the original experience is intact, exactly as it was in 1995. The mag is literally the exact same magazine as I was reading in 1995. I don't really talk about my day job a lot, but my day job, I work for a museum, and I work in, like alongside digital preservation, and it's hard. Like, it's hard to preserve digital assets. They take resourcing, they take computers and hard drive space and RAM and bandwidth, internet bandwidth to access. Like, it's a lot of work. But also specifically, like, preserving the experience of looking at, say, a 2002 era website like oneup.com on my 1440p like OLED or like LCD or whatever monitor I'm using. It doesn't hit the same as when I was looking at it on my 17-inch CRT monitor that it was designed to look, to be read on, because it is letterboxed. It's like, this wide on the screen. The text is all tiny. And so it doesn't imagine that like we could get magazines, but they weren't really proper, like they weren't really presented in the way that they were back then. That aspect of it, I think, takes away some of the like emotional resonance of websites versus like something like a physical magazine, because the experience is changed. Like as the technology changes, the experience has changed. And like,
see me dragging my browser window back and forth between my vertical monitor and my horizontal monitor so I can see one page in its exact aspect ratio, all big and beautiful, or both pages of a 2-page layout at the same time as they were meant to be experienced.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think the content's always going to be relevant. There's incredible work that's been published on the internet about video games. And it will remain like such a valuable asset for research and for preservation of culture. I just think it's like harder to just experience digital stuff like websites in the same way that we are with magazines on this. And I make websites for a living. Like, that's my job.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's like they're more ephemeral in a way that makes it difficult to preserve the experience as time marches on.
Especially as many great websites have been bought up and then wiped rather than bought up and just left.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
On one of the episodes, we were looking at an ad for heat.net, right? The like Sega thing. And so I looked up heat.net, and it's like a generic WordPress site for like a HVAC company in Florida.
Yep.
And that's what it is now,
yep.
And so you can go to the Wayback Machine and find some stuff, but like it also exists in a different form, which is just strange. It's just from a preservation perspective, it's really rough.
Tough. It's tough. And I think, depending on what, we're going to look at different eras of games media for season 2, season 3, etc. Right. And there's kind of a scary window in the early to mid aughts where there's a lot of stuff that was published digitally and then vanished.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't part of a corporate conglomerate yet, or maybe some of that, there are some ancient texts websites from the 90s that are still around because it was only ever one person and they maintained them. So there's some stuff that's perfectly time capsule, and there's other stuff that's just completely gone.
Yeah.
And you never know until you go looking for it, which any particular thing you're looking for is something. These magazines still exist, and we can go back and look for them. And looking at the Campus Life review of Final Fantasy VII that I couldn't track down, I talked about it. It is just literally last episode, so I won't go back into it too much, but it's like, okay, I am in the middle of a gigantic academic research library at the physically biggest college campus in the world, one of the bigger undergraduate institutions in the world, Michigan State University. And I'm like, well, I have access to what looks to be about a 80 to 90% complete text-only archive where most of the issues have most of the text saved as text. But unless and until I can get my hands on a physical copy of every magazine published in late 1997 or early to mid 1998, I'm not gonna find that review, and I'm not gonna know if I know I didn't hallucinate it. I read some somewhere, but like until I physically find that magazine, I'll never know. And that is meaningful, and that will always be meaningful that got printed and was made a physical thing that mattered.
Yeah. I think you bring up an interesting point too about like corporate content and websites and like archiving those versus like smaller websites. Like one of like the websites, like the first websites, gaming websites that I was like always checking was it was called Icy Brian's RPG page, and it's still up. I'm gonna try to share it here.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, and it's like, this is it, Icy Brian's RPG page, and like Icy Brian updated it in 2022. It had been 12 years, but like this is like, this is the site, and he had like tons of game info about the games that I really loved, right? And I would like reference this all the time when I was playing Suikoden 2. This was last updated in 2020 or 2002, right? And it's just still up there. And like, he has a link to his like personal website, and he's just a regular guy just like me and you, but he keeps this up in the same way that I keep up, my blog, A Dribble of Ink, which I ran for a long time. And it's still up, and I'll keep it up as long as I possibly can, because it is, something that can be archived and is maintainable and sustainable for me to do personally. And so, maybe that's where the opportunity for nostalgia comes from. Like I do still go and check out the GIA, the Gaming Intelligence Agency, when I'm trying to reference, like I was writing about Final Fantasy IX recently and wanted to go reference all the leaked Final Fantasy IX material, and the Gaming Intelligence Agency was the best place to get that. And it still existed, and it's still up. Well, maybe it's not up, but at least on the Wayback Machine, I was able to get access to it. But yeah, so God bless the fans, right? Making content and keeping it up there. Oh, there. Yeah. That's it. That's a nice
I found it.
website.
I found it.
Yeah.
I finally got one good snapshot. It took forever to load, but like this is cool, man.
Yeah.
News, previews, reviews. I tried to replicate this with the cool little curves and stuff when I was trying to build websites, and I'm like, no, I can't. Stock watch, but like, John Carmack speaks. Yo, wait, on the eve of the release of Quake 3 test for Mac. Oh man, one of my favorite webcomic. Like individual webcomics of all time was the Penny Arcade, where they had their Chuck character who they liked to make fun of because he liked Mac. And they're like, hey, you guys think you have enough machine to run the new Quake 3 demo? And Tycho's like, I've got a Pentium 3. It's like a tiny god. He's like, cool. Well, mine's grape. Well, see ya. And they're like, oh, why is that coming out on Mac first? But yeah, like it's great that the Wayback Machine exists, but hey, the owner of the Internet Archive is a multimillionaire patent troll. Like he trolls the concept of IP, right? He's like reverse. Instead of like, I own the IP and I'm going to sue everybody who infringes it, he's like, I'm going to infringe every IP in the world and dare people to sue me. And it's a very high profile thing a couple of years ago where he very nearly got sued right out of existence, right? So it takes just the wrong lawsuit or the wrong stewardship of that, and Wayback Machine is gone. And the only serious attempt to archive the internet goes away. I mean, Library of Congress has some of its stuff, but it's tough. It's tough. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
We should probably move on.
Yes. I mean, this honestly could be a whole episode just
It very nearly has been.
And you know what? This might be something we also get into more in a future season as we do move into sort of the web era of games media at some point. Now, for the final question we have from Frozen Leroy Bob on Discord. How do you handle playing/talking about problematic games like Cyberpunk 2077 with its awful transphobic marketing fetishization of trans individuals, and Hogwarts Legacy with all the turf stuff from Rowling and all the controversy surrounding Harry Potter? How do we talk about games? I think I'm going to jump in with an answer, but like you and I are pretty open about our criticism for stuff like, anti-trans content or anti-trans creators. We're not really afraid to call that stuff out or talk about it when it comes up. We've noted, transphobia in old gaming magazines. And so I think you and I are pretty open books in our support for stuff like the trans community. And so when that comes up in games, a lot of the time I just don't cover games like Hogwarts Legacy, and I just make no effort to try to incorporate it into anything I do because I'm not interested in it. Despite being, like many people, a big Harry Potter fan for a long time. But I think like addressing problematic content is important. Now, like the nature of the show means we don't talk about a ton of like modern games outside of like how they are contextually relevant to whatever issue of a magazine we're looking at. But, I don't think we purposefully shy away from difficult conversations when we need to have them.
No, and I think it's a balance because, for me, I think it's very important to flag stuff as it happens. I think it's important to talk about honestly about the stuff that's out there and was out there. Like I said, the reason I showed and read that letter, like I'm not super proud of that. It didn't age well, but it's a snapshot of the kind of stuff that was getting printed in the magazine at the time, the kind of stuff, that I was reading and went, wow, this is cool. And I aspire to be that. I aspire to be approved by these people making this cool content I like, and there were parts of me at that time where I was like, I don't like some of this stuff. Like some of this stuff that's out there is gross. I don't like the grossest game. I don't like, that Death Trap Dungeon ad, right? Like I didn't like being like that overtly marketed to in that way, right? But then also like, oh, okay, like, ooh, that character's pretty. Like that did happen, right? So it's like it's disingenuous for me to be like, oh, well, like my sense of what's cool and good was always dialed to like 2015 Twitter's idea of what was cool and good.
Right. Like, I mean, we read a whole letter about how hot Sonya Blade was, like that you wrote in, right? So like, there is like, and you said you didn't want to share it, but it's there. It exists. It's like not talking about it doesn't make it exist. But,
and I think, and it's in a weird way, I'm proud of it too, where I'm like, hey, I'm 14. Yeah, that wasn't the bad. There's some good writing in there, right? Like you can see how I got to where I am now, right? Yeah. Like it's like, but like, so looking back at the good and at the bad at the same time, I do think there, like I said, there is a balance because it's like if you make the whole show about call outs, first of all, we're not the people to make a whole show about the failings of games and games media and how they fail marginalized people because we are two white guys from North America. Like we're grew up middle class, to various descriptors of that term. We had access to all these games machines at the time. We had access to all these magazines at the time. My mom spent more money on magazine subscriptions than, like I said, she subscribed to Sports Illustrated for me. That was $90 a year when I was in elementary school, which was a million years ago. That's like $200 a year today. That'd be like $20 a month type subscription. Like, so like we have access and privilege, but we are in solidarity with marginalized people of all stripes. And we try to be conscious of that, and we try to call it out. And stuff that's just so inherently toxic. I can't give J.K. Rowling $1. I can't do it. I'm not gonna do it. I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to think about it. My not talking or thinking about it on this show doesn't stop the thing from being a success. I'll call it out on social media. I'll call it out on other channels as well. I can say this is bad and we shouldn't play it. But no amount of me injecting that into this podcast is going to stop it from being a thing. So it's a balance.
Yeah. And like, on FunFactor, we have total creative control over what we do. Recently for MMORPG.com, I got to write a review, or not even a review, just like an op-ed about Avowed coming out on the PlayStation 5. So it's an Obsidian RPG. I was really excited about it, but it was only came out on Xbox and like PC. Obsidian is a Microsoft developer, and so it does fall under the BDS boycott. And so that was a big conflict for me about writing about that, and trying to figure out how to write thoughtfully and openly in support of what the BDS boycott represents, which I believe in, while also covering a creative work from people that I think are intrinsically good people, and how boycotts overlap with a lot of that stuff. And so I wrote in my piece multiple references to the BDS boycott and what I think are some of Microsoft's problematic elements, and it didn't make it into the final published draft. But I still you still need to kind of like take your shot where context requires it, right? Mm-hmm. And so like, yeah, I don't know, it's tough, but I think that there's you talk about how we're not the right people necessarily to like lead a charge on representing marginalized groups, right? Because we are two white guys, but I do think also recognizing where our privilege allows us to maybe say things that other people can't without fear of repercussion also does put a little bit of an onus on us. And we'll get to a point where we're reviewing magazines that have Harry Potter content, right? Like we're pretty close to probably the first Harry Potter games because they came out on the PlayStation and the Game Boy Color and stuff, right? And so like we're getting close to a point where we will have to address something like J.K. Rowling, our relationship with Harry Potter, how that's changed. And I think just being honest, but not, like you said, getting too caught up in being a show about call outs or, getting too caught up in that, and just also picking and choosing what we're covering. Like there are some YouTube channels that I really like that keep covering Hogwarts Legacy and keep using footage from it or doing like tech deep dives into it. And I'm like, I think we could pick a different game. Like, yeah, there's so many games out here. I think we could probably use something other than Hogwarts Legacy, and that bothers me, right? I don't think that like pretending it just doesn't exist is valuable, but I also think like not choosing to platform a game like that whenever possible is an important kind of core principle for both of us.
For sure. Absolutely. All right. I think that is all the questions that we have. This has been an outstanding set of questions, an outstanding episode, I think. A lot of great stuff to think about, a lot of great stuff to consider. We've got a lot of great stuff lined up as we speak. We are scheduling more bonus content as we wrap up this season. We are shaping up what next season is going to look like. We are going to stay on our content schedule every 2 weeks, new episodes. And so stay with us. Definitely continue to support us if you're able to. FunFactor Ultra, join these live streams. They're a ton of fun for us to do. They give us great great content. And I love the back and forth with the audience. Love to be able to have that kind of insight as we talk about it, right? And have that kind of energy. It's awesome. It helps us perk up our episodes a little bit because we know people are watching, right? It doesn't devolve into just, oh yeah, Ty and Aidan are just talking on Zoom. We forget that the red light is going. But yeah, no, and it's awesome. It's been great as this show has evolved over this first season to what it is now. It's going to keep evolving and hopefully keep getting better and better with your support. Again, go to funfactorpod.com. You can go to all the socials from there, all of our channels from there. You can get to the Discord from there. You can get to a memberful and become a member, all from there. And again, leave us a note anywhere on social media. We love to be able to do the letters section. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave us a comment on YouTube. We love to read those, love to shout those out. And you get the little thrill, the little hit of dopamine from seeing your name or username in a show that you like. And it gives us the little thrill, a little dopamine hit of knowing people are watching and listening and paying attention and enjoying what we do because we enjoy doing it. Special thanks, as always, to Millennium Falk for all our amazing original music. Check out his work at millenniumfalck.com. Unlike these old magazines, you do not have to wait a whole month for your next installment. We drop episodes every 2 weeks. So hey, go to funfactorpod.com. I promise you cannot miss the sign up widget on our homepage. If you do sign up, you and we will have a maximum score in Fun Factor.